Thanks for tuning in to The Real Deal Show, brought to you by eBodyboarding.com and Tribe Boards. How the hell are you, Mr. Patrick Graham Caldwell?
I'm doing well, thanks. Yes.
Yes, I love it, man. You know, I should introduce the show because we're going to have just a regular conversation here. And so I'm going to just welcome everybody to the Real Deal Show. Haven't done an episode for about a month. I've just been too busy this summer, but this is a guy, folks, if you're watching, that I've been wanting to interview for quite some time. It's really since I started the show, but I've never done a Zoom interview. I always did them in person. So this was my chance to test out the Zoom feature and get Pat Caldwell, the legendary Pat Caldwell, on this show. Sorry, I'm messing around with all this video because I'm trying to get the cameras correct here, and I want to make sure I've got it right. But I'm so stoked to have Pat on the show because, dude, I mean, you're a legend, and we've known each other for what, like 40 years, maybe?
Yes.
I think I met you in 82, Pat. So it's now 2023. So 41 years it's been. 41 right. Years, right?
Yep. That's right.
Yeah, and you know, anyone who knows Pat or knows the name Pat Caldwell knows that Pat is in fact an iconic figure in the sport of bodyboarding. Not to mention, we've been friends for so many years, and there's a story here that needs to be told. Now, I looked around to see if, you know, there were other podcasts with you, and I found one with Patty Serrano that she did. I don't know how long ago that interview was, but she did an interview with you a number of years ago. And I just happened to come across it. So we'll touch on that in a little bit. But yeah, I mean, have you been on some other podcasts, Pat?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I've been on Josh Kirkman's podcast.
Right.
Maybe 2019.
Les Boogie.
Les Boogie.
Yeah, and he hasn't been doing many podcasts lately. So he's I don't know, he's busy with other things that he's doing. So, but you know, I have a different perspective than Josh because I've known you for a long time. We competed together. You know, we've done a lot together. So what I wanted to do, Pat, is just kind of like let's turn back the clock. First of all, let's establish where you are in life. How old are you now, Pat?
I am 61.
Okay, so you're now 61. I'm 59. I'll be 60 in February. So we're in that same age range, you could say. And you started bodyboarding a long freaking time ago, right? I think I read one interview that you said you first rode a boogie like in what, 1976, 74?
74. Right? 74. I got a boogie for my birthday in May of 1974. I had been surfing, though, stand-up surfing for about 4.5, 5 years prior to that. So I had experience in the ocean.
Okay.
And surfing. And then 74, I got my first boogie.
And so you were surfing and you grew up on Oahu, right?
That's correct. And that's where I'm at now. I've been here exactly 10 years.
Yeah. So you're back where it all started. And we're going to touch on that whole period that you lived over here in California as well, eventually here. But yeah, I wanted to talk about you know, your early days. So I think your dad got you into surfing, right?
That's correct. Yeah. He wanted me to be a surfer just like he was. And I got my first surfboard actually when I was 2 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I was
And where
two,
did he take you out when you were 2 years old?
probably the shore break in Huntington Beach, but you know, at that age, but really I wasn't even swimming. So, I mean, it was probably just being held on to. But he had broken a surfboard and in Huntington and had the shaper there, Gordy surfboards, actually reshape it down to look like a mini longboard. And now I still got it in my living room right here. It's a 6 foot Gordy surfboard in like mint condition.
Really? You have the first board, you still have it?
Still have it.
That is insane, man. I
Yeah.
love that. So I mean, that thing's just vintage. You could probably sell that for a good chunk of money, right?
Yeah. Oh, and the shapers passed away, so that probably upped the price as well. You know, I've seen boards like these, and this is a one-off. I mean, there is nothing like this. There's nothing like this, and JJ's just brought it over to me in on the entire planet. I'll put it behind me.
Oh yeah, look at this.
But there, there's the logo on the tail.
I don't see any dings or anything on that board.
No, there are some scratches and stuff, but
show my favorite part, the banana.
yeah, my dad had a Chiquita banana sticker glassed into the nose right here.
That's epic. I love that, man.
That's wild.
Yeah, so I mean, you were obviously on a stand-up surfboard early, and then you got a boogie. How did that all come about?
You know, growing up here in Hawaii Kai, I'm very close to Sandy Beach and Makapu, which are huge body surfing, and back then mat riding and paddleboard places.
Yeah.
And the boogie was brand new, and so I don't know. I showed some kind of interest. Maybe I saw one of those early ads in Surfer magazine. You know, the little eighth of a page ad that Tom Morey took out.
Yep.
And I was inquisitive, and they started to show up on the beaches here at Makapu and Sandy's, and my birthday came around, and my dad just bought me a boogie board. So the first one I got, actually, interesting story about this one. You know, was it the L200 skins for the original? And they came in two sizes. They came in the 3200 cc and what was like 5,000 cc's or something? Or
yes.
So I got actually the pint size one for my birthday. I was 12 years old. I was probably all of about 4'10" and 86 pounds.
Now that surprises me that you were not taller than that at age 12, but obviously you sprouted up eventually. But yep.
Yeah, by the time, well, maybe I was a little taller than that. Maybe I was like 5'2" or so. But so I got one of those pint size ones, and I took it out, and I was just like, this thing is just too small for me. And then I knew a guy who I went to school with who had one of the full size kit bodyboards. So I traded him for it because he was a little guy. So we actually traded straight up, and I got a full size L200 skin kit bodyboard, and then I gave him my 3200 cc one, and we were happy campers.
Were you wearing swim fins at that point?
Yes. My fins, I started out with duck feet, and they just tore the tops of my toes off and ankles. And then I switched to the solid green Churchills.
Oh, the real flexible ones.
The real flexible ones. And then that didn't last long. And I ended up getting like the blue and yellow Makapu Churchills after that.
Yeah.
And then was it blue and yellow or green and yellow?
Well, yeah, they were blue. I mean, the ones I got in 1979 were blue yellow. That was my first pair of fins. But I don't know if they made a green yellow. You would know. You've been around longer than me in this sport.
What was it? Blue and green. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I went to Churchill's until I went to Vipers later on in the 80s. So
yeah. So there weren't any choices in those very early days. It was basically duck feet and Churchill's. And you wore one or the other, whether they worked for your feet or not. It didn't matter. So you guys were going out where? At Sandy's, Makapu?
Yes. Sandy's, Makapu, wherever it was good, depending on the wind and the swell direction. You know, on this edge of Oahu, we've got basically three sides of surf direction that hits, east or the Kaiwi coast and Sandy's and all the way around to the South Shore. So there was a lot of options. The first spots I would go to in the summertime, I'd go out to Portlock at the point and on the boogie board and if I wasn't on my surfboard, because I kind of did both at that time. But
Yep.
and then when the wind was up, I was at Makapu, and when the winds and the swell were just right, I was on the reefs or on the shore break at Sandy's, just trying to ride bigger and bigger waves and learn how to use the rail of the boogie board that was brand new at that time.
And so you grew up, I know you lived in Portlock in Hawaii Kai, so you were basically 10, 12 minutes from Sandy's. Pretty close, right? You made it
Exactly.
convenient, and that made it your kind of your home break. And you could go there sort of on the daily. And who was your crew? Who did you hang out with over there?
Oh man.
A who's who of
Gosh.
of professional bodyboarding, right?
There was, back when I first started there, it was just the Boarders and me and a couple other guys. One of the guys I looked up to on the boogie back then, Kyoki Lemson, was one of the guys that was first doing those helicopter spins out big sandy shore break. It was just amazing to watch. And I mean, gosh, there just wasn't a lot of guys on the boogie. I looked up to the Richards, Primo and Royal Richards were big on the board out at Sandy's and Makapu. And Harry, the boarder. And so I
I love that there was a guy named Harry the boarder.
Yeah.
No last name, just hey, there's Harry the boarder. That's great.
Yeah, I just knew him as Harry, but
of course.
But so there really wasn't anybody, not until I started to meet. Well, of course, there was Jack Lindholm. Of course, he was the king. I was always too scared to talk to him. He's 2 years older than I am, and he was starting to get by 76, 77, he was already starting to get his picture in Surfer magazine, and I was just like, he was like a god, and he was the king. We always called him, he was the king.
So he was the guy that you guys all looked up to at that time, because he was really the first guy to get in the mags.
Right. And, get his boards for free and get sponsored and what have you. And he was just like, and nobody was even close to what he was doing on the boogie board. It was, his belly riding and the jack stance. Jack the Ripper was the one who I idolized, and I wanted to be someday,
as notable as he was in the sport.
Well put,
which did happen. And then I think you we'll get into how I think you surged beyond, his level of fame was amazing at the beginning, but it seemed like he was almost a reluctant hero in the sport. He didn't have that personality to capitalize on, his notoriety. He really was shy, I think. I mean, you tell me, you hung out with Jack the Ripper Lindholm, right? Was he kind of shy?
Yeah. Well, I would characterize it as extremely humble.
Okay.
Once you get to know Jack, he's anything but shy. But you're right. I mean, new people and accepting the notoriety that he had back there in the mid to late 70s, I think it was tough for him.
All the girls wanted him, though.
He had that bronze skin. That's JJ in the background, Pat's wife. And she was there. She was there in those early days. Yeah. So
I'm getting red.
Yeah. So Pat, I mean, here's a cool little sidebar, and that is that as I remember the story, as you've told it about your invention of the El Rolo, Jack is the one who actually coined the term El Rolo. Is that right?
He termed the term El Rolo pertaining to what I was doing on the boogie board. I think they were, it was kind of a joke maneuver that was done in what was that movie back in the 60s when the longboarder kind of flipped over at Malibu,
Yeah,
and then
Endless Summer. That's right. They did say that. Endless Summer. Bruce Brown said that. Yes.
right. Ooh, El Rolo. But so I was kind of, I think it was Jack kind of mimicking that Bruce Brown saying, ooh, El Rolo. But
Right.
yeah, my first one that I completed, I actually did it right in front of them as I was at Pipe Littles at Sandy's, a little piece of reef that goes into the shore break. And I paddled back out.
Yep.
And oh, Pat, what do you call that? El Rolo? Started laughing, like the Bruce Brown movie or something. Just kind of
Yes.
flippity flop.
I love that. And there's actually a video online. I was trying to do a screen share here of your a video where you basically describe that. And I have it right here. Hopefully this is going to work. Let's see. Can you hear this or see it?
I definitely can see it. Nice beard. Can't hear it though, Jay.
Okay. I don't know. Hopefully my listeners can hear it. If not, I'll edit this out. But
Okay.
basically what you said in that clip, Pat, is that you took it eventually to the North Shore, and then Daniel Kaimi sort of jumped in and he took it sort of to the next level and was doing it with Pipeline, which eventually you did as well. So let's talk about those early days at Sandy's. You had a crew. Obviously, Jack Lindholm was sort of the kingpin, but there are these other guys around you, and let's name some names, people that all bodyboarders of my generation, your generation will recognize. Talk about those names.
Well, of course, JP Patterson, was one of them.
Yep.
There was a lot of the local guys. Well, of course, Ben Severson. Ben was right there. He's your age and or about 5 months.
Yeah, a little younger, but yes.
But so I watched Ben grow up at Sandy's, as he was a little pudgy kid with white zinc oxide across his nose and cheeks. And then he kind of grew in. He sprouted up and became the human pinball and the tube troll, and
Right.
was extremely talented, of course, and the rest is history.
Yep.
And a lot of the local guys, Kalen Tanaka, Richard Pinto, Pat Torres. There was just there was just
a slew of names. JP, was JP among that group as well?
Yes, absolutely. He was like one of the godfathers for sure. He was a big Makapu guy, but also, charged Sandy's and it was, just an amazing time, and especially as the 80s started and into the first couple of years of the 1980s, it really, really exploded. It really started to take off, especially with, the pipeline contests. The first year was actually 1980. It was the Surecraft North Shore, the Coca-Cola Surecraft bodyboard contest.
Yep.
And that was December of 80. And then, gosh, soon as that contest went, people were just like, I'm on board. And people were coming out of the woodworks, and great riders. I mean, just fantastic local riders. And we all kind of, were pushing each other and trying to push in the envelope. And then, of course, Stuart showed up one day. I think that was in, I want to say the spring of 80. I'm sorry, spring of 82. He showed up at the Sandy Beach Body Surfing Championships and entered the boogie board division, which I think, yeah, it was boogie board division by then, and finished third behind Jack and myself.
Okay. And
Yeah,
no one
so
knew who he was.
nobody knew who he was. He came over with a guy named Bobo, who was a body surfer from the Kona side, who kind of chaperoned him over there. Because I think, well, no, he would have been like 19 years old but yeah, just nobody knew who he was. And then all of a sudden he's, pulling Rolos and getting barreled and coming out and just, great edge control. And we're like, oh, wow, this guy is like, where's he been hiding out? And
Yeah.
when we first came across Mike Stewart, or he came across us. So.
Well, let me do one more screen share, and you'll be able to see this one. This is a visual. It's not a video. And this one's pretty classic. I want to show you this photo here. It's going to be right here down this page. There's a lot of classic shots of you, Pat. Can you see these?
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about, there's your clean cut phase with Tony Prince on the beach. And it says Tom Prince, but it's Tony. There's you in your Jesus phase. We'll get into that later. There's you preparing to die at Waimea Shore Break. Now, you mentioned that 1980 Surecraft Coca-Cola event. Here's a classic photo. This is from, I believe, Action Now magazine, maybe. And you actually, you won this event, or you got second or third? Am I right? I think JP won it, but they put a picture of you saying that this is John Patterson, who took first and won $1,000 and an all expense paid trip to Kauai for one. So they put your picture, but it was JP that won. And as I recall, in fact, I interviewed JP about this. There was a bit of controversy because you were doing Rolos at Pipeline, blowing minds. People thought he's won it for sure, but they gave JP the win. Presumably, I don't know, he got two brides. Do you tell me?
I wasn't a judge. I wasn't on the stand, but I thought that what I was doing was progressive and more vertical and should have been scored higher. So
okay. Well, I was going to say, so you at that time, as I recall, the Rolo is a different maneuver than it is today. In other words, as I recall, you guys would go up to the lip, sort of flip over, and then slide back down the face. Is that correct?
No, I was doing rolls underneath the lip and disengaging and flying and landing. So,
okay.
No, flipping over on the top of a lip. I was actually using the barrel. I was doing barrel rolls.
Okay. So all right. So, and then obviously Mike came into the fray that we're going to pick up where you just left off earlier. And Mike started kind of pushing everyone, right? He was kind of taking your move. And as the claim is, he and some other people claim they independently invented the Rolo, unbeknownst to you or what you were doing, because there was no internet or anything back then. So there's a few people that claim, hey, I was doing them too. I never saw Pat, whatever, but you kind of received the credit for introducing it to the sport, much like Eppo and the ARS. There's other people that claim to have done that move, but Eppo was the first guy to introduce it in competition and really to the media, the bodyboarding media. So yeah, I mean, Mike had sort of a big influence as he came up on you and all your contemporaries, Ben, and eventually, guys like Keith Sasaki, who were coming up in the sport as well, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yes. But as I remember you, Pat, back in those days, I remember you being extremely competitive. You were tenacious out in the water. So let's talk about the beginning of your competitive career, because now we're into the early 80s. When I met you, it was 1982. It was the first year that Maury had done a pipeline event, which was actually, as I recall, the third pipeline bodyboarding event. No, I take that back. The second, because the Surecraft event was in 1980, Maury pipe event in 82, and then Scott Hawaii did an event at Pipeline as well, right? So
Yeah,
yeah.
there was no event in 81 because they decided to move the permitting, or Bob Thomas moved the permit to January instead of December, like we had done it in 1980. So there was no pipe event in 81.
Right. So the first Maury pipe event is really where the bodyboarding media was all like, people from all around the world came to the event. And you know, for me, it was just an eye opener. And I put myself in the same category as all these people who came from these far flung regions and had never seen the kind of high performance riding that you and your contemporaries, JP, Mike, and so forth, Daniel Kaimi, were doing at Pipeline. I mean, were you feeling really comfortable at Pipeline by this time, by 1982?
I would say no.
Okay.
Not super comfortable. You know, when you're 20 years old, you don't think of a lot of consequences, and you don't ever think you're going to die, and you know you're one of the best riders, and you're just going to go, and you're just going to go. You know, and looking back at it now, I realized there were a lot of close calls where I could have easily been knocked out underwater. You know, I've been dragged across the pipe reef at high speeds, thinking if it was my head instead of my fins hitting the bottom right now, I would be dead. But you know, in that 4 to 6 foot range at pipe, yeah, it was like a glorified sandy beach, really.
Yeah.
But when it started to get in that Hawaiian 8-10 feet, that was another realm, and it actually took me a good 6 to 8 years after 1982 to start feeling comfortable. You know, when it starts breaking on that second reef or lurching on the first reef at, you know, 16 to 20 foot faces.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I wasn't comfortable in the beginning. A
Well,
lot of us.
you made it look like you were, from my perspective.
Yeah, fake it till you make it.
Yeah. So at that point, you know, the first pipe event, Daniel Kaimi was playing with Pipeline. I remember seeing him at second reef pipe before the event started, just doing helicopters and rolls and doing the elbow chin thing that he used to do in the barrel. Mike Stewart seemed comfortable. JP seemed comfortable, and some other guys, obviously Jack Lindholm. And, you know, you were right in the mix there. Every year of those early pipeline contest days. In fact, the second year the event was held at Haleiwa. You did really well in that event, right?
Yeah, I got a second place, and I was the only one to get a barrel. Howling onshore 6 foot rip tide Haleiwa.
Yeah.
So I was able to pull off a second place there. But going back to 82, I actually missed 82 because it happened during finals week, I
Oh,
believe.
no. Wow.
So I was really upset, and I think at that time I was a Maury team rider, and I actually had to tell, I think it was Mary Lee at that time.
Yeah.
I told her, I said, I can't make this event. I've got finals at University of Hawaii, and you know, I wasn't going to fail and have to take an entire semester off for an event. And I kind of regret it now, of course. But
do you? Because what was your major at that time?
Communications.
Okay, so you regret that looking back on it. And who knows how that would have turned out that first year at Pipe, but I think you kind of erased that memory by doing well so many years following that, which I'm going to touch on in a second. But let's just back up just a tiny bit to your entry into the world of sponsorship, which dovetails into the competitive career. Who was your first sponsor in the sport of bodyboarding, and how did that come about? Was it Maury Bodyboards?
It was
Okay.
Maury Boogie Bodyboards, and what happened was, gosh, what year was that? 81? Yeah, I think it was March of 81.
Okay.
And I was approached by I was doing, pretty well. I'd done well in the contest at Pipeline in the prior December, 4 months earlier.
Yep.
And Roger Kundal, who is also a member of the Iowa Canoe Club as I was the representative for Maury Boogie's sales rep in Hawaii. So he kind of knew who I was. And then, of course, at that point, Keith Sasaki was already kind of in with Patty Serrano. And so I guess my name came up for some reason. JP might have been already working or writing with Scott Hawaii, or one of those. I think it was Scott Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
So I was the next name on the list, and I got together. I think it was it Patty? Yeah, it was Patty in 81.
Mm-hmm.
She asked me, she goes, "We need a third team member. Who's that gonna, do you know anybody who's up and coming or really hot and just gonna be really, really talented and somebody who's gonna be worth sponsoring?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Ben Severson." And the rest is history, right? So
He owes you, man.
he is one of my best friends today.
That's
Probably.
cool, man. Yeah, that's so cool that you guys, I mean, we'll get into your, now you guys judge together and stuff like that. And there's a Molokai connection there, but we'll get into that in a bit. So, okay. So early days, Maury picked you up. Obviously you were a blossoming talent on the island of Oahu, and you were really at the forefront, and which is when I started seeing pictures of you and Ben and JP and Keith at Sandy's in Surfer magazine when they do an odd article about boogie boarding in Hawaii, and you guys were always the stars. And some of the photographers were focusing on you, one of those being Tom Boyle. He was kind of an up and coming photographer and bodyboarder too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. He did it all. He was a very good bodyboarder, boogie boarder at that time. And he was instrumental in creating Bodyboarding magazine by just the sheer amount of time he spent shooting with the top echelon of writers, Mike, Ben, Keith, and myself, and JP, and then other photographers. Of course, when the magazine started, I don't want to get ahead of you here, but there were other photographers like Lauren Pritchett and John Bilderback, and even some of the older photographers, Steve Wilkins,
Dan Merkel, maybe occasionally, Hornbaker, Aaron Chang, eventually, all pointing their lens at you. And of course, Brian Beelman and Russ Hoover, who eventually became very prolific photographers for bodyboarders as well as surfers. But
Aaron Lloyd.
Aaron Lloyd, yeah, I did a podcast with Aaron, and yeah, I mean, for me, he was instrumental in my career. But for you, you mentioned Bodyboarding magazine. That's a perfect segue into the fact that you were on the very first cover of the very first bodyboarding magazine ever made in 1985. Am I correct on the year?
That's correct. Yeah, there were, I believe, 2 special editions that came out that year. I was on the first cover, and I think Ben was on the second cover.
Yes, that's right. And the cool thing about that, or I should say the interesting thing about that, is back in those days, the people that ran the magazine, Maury was kind of the main advertiser, right? And Maury wanted to make bodyboarding fun and safe. So the whole mantra was smile, make it look fun and unthreatening. So there you are on the very first cover of Bodyboarding magazine with a huge smile on your face, right?
That's it. And I had white teeth back then, and I was all 21 years old, and yeah, it's quite interesting. I mean, if you kind of put into perspective how crazy that moment was when our sport first graced the pages that media, the magazine. It's kind of like one company owning the internet, and a certain genre is being sent to the entire world, and you're it. It's not
yeah.
everybody having an Instagram page and being their own bodyboard magazine. There was just one media, and that was it. And it was just like, it was crazy. And I just feel so honored. And it was a lot of work working with Tom Boyle on the shore break to try to get a photo like that. We were really, we knew what lens he had, how far away we needed to be, what the lighting was, what time of the day to go. And you can attest to this, Jay. Yeah. We had miniature photographers ourselves to work so well with them to get the right shot, because they only had 36 images in their camera. Otherwise they had to go back up and spend 20 minutes changing their spinning the reel on the thing and putting a new canister in there. So it was critical that we were able to work at the right time and work closely with these photographers to get the right shot that would fit a cover, fit a center spread. So it was a symbiotic relationship we had with these early photographers, for sure.
100%. A lot of people don't realize that it was work, that they think, oh, you just go out and surf and the photographer's got to get there and get the shot. But it was, like you said, a symbiotic relationship where you learned what's the good lighting, what kind of wave should I go on, how far away should the photographer be when the prime part of that wave happens, right? Because guys that were new to that whole game, they'd be too far away from the photographer. Or here's another one that you remember: if it was cloudy, cloud passing over the sun, you wouldn't take off on a wave. The experienced guys, it'd be the young new guys, they'd take off on a cloudy wave and the photographer wouldn't even shoot it because the lighting sucks when the cloud's over. So there was a real art to it. It was like a job to learn how to work with photographers. And you mentioned Tom Boyle shooting that cover shot. That first magazine, I think one time we sat down and counted, there were like 55 of the photos in that mag were shot by Tom Boyle. So he was super instrumental in kickstarting the media side of bodyboarding to where we all were able to have careers at it eventually. He was such a catalyst in that.
Absolutely. Tom was definitely the pioneer and super instrumental to kickstarting the sport, and it wouldn't be where it's at now if it wasn't for him.
Which lets me want to touch on the video thing. So the very first magazine, you were on the cover. Also, the very first ever bodyboarding videos, which were how to bodyboard with the pros, number 1 and 2. You were one of the main dudes in those 2 videos. I don't remember. I think they came out around probably 83, 84, before the magazine. And a lot of those sort of how-to scenes were shot in your pool in your backyard at Portlock, right?
How to duck dive and how to paddle and how to whatever it was. Yeah, it was a static environment that made teaching a little easier. So it was just worked out that way.
Yeah. So I don't know if anyone's ever digitized any of those. Maybe they're on YouTube somewhere, but those are a piece of history. Not only those 2 bodyboarding videos at the beginning, but the first cover of Bodyboarding magazine. I think I have 1 or 2 packed away in a box somewhere of the magazine, but those videos are gold. Do you still have copies of those 2 videos?
I can't say that I do, but it may be packed away in a box somewhere deep down. Yeah, I may have those how-to videos.
Well, who's the guy that made him? What was his name? Was it?
I think Boyle was part of that.
Was he?
Yeah.
Okay. Unreal Productions or something. Unreal Productions. Does that sound right? I think at the beginning, I'm not sure, but anyway, whoever it was, eventually Tom Boyle not only helped start the mag, but he started the bodyboarding video magazines, Bodyboarders video magazine series, and put out 8 or 10 videos, which featured you and all the guys we've been talking about, and worked with the magazine in concert to raise your profiles in the sport, right?
Yeah. And, people having these videos, they were able to rewind and play again, and they were able to learn how to do these moves, no-handed spinners and Rolos and reverse spinners and aerials and, whatever else came up during that series. They were able to look and learn how to do these maneuvers just by having these videos. So again, very instrumental in spreading the sport worldwide.
Yeah.
Many markets.
Amazing. Now, who do you remember, being innovative back in the 80s? Obviously yourself, but who else was, what other riders were you sort of, very competitive with in terms of like trying to push the sport at that time? And was it all in fun, or was there a serious rivalry going on then?
Well, in the water, the friendship went out the window, but on the beach we were all still real good friends. That second generation of bodyboarders like Kevin Okamura and a couple other Dean Marzol, and those guys were really pushing the rail control, and Kevin especially, his rail control was probably at some point in the mid 80s was probably the best in the world. Just something that just flawless to watch, and so beautiful and graceful in the water. So, I mean, there were a lot of riders that we all kind of fed off of each other. When somebody would do something really cool or have, they pull off something that they would never seen before. We all wanted to go try to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the materials were getting better in the boards. The shapes were starting to be, the boards were getting thinner. The rails were getting thinner. And the boards were getting stiffer. They were getting faster. And then, of course, that just opened up the aerial game.
Yeah, talk about the progression from the early boards, obviously initially the kit boards, then the L200 foam boards, and then what was called the original, and then the Proline Red Edge, and eventually the Mach 7. Did those just take the performance to exponential levels each time those new boards came out?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for one thing, the boards lasted longer as they got stiffer, and the Red Edge was nice and stiff and created a better platform for rail control and carving and spinners. And then, of course, the Mach 7 was the launching pad to the modern bodyboard. And when that came out, that opened up the down the line speed that board could attain. And then it just a matter of time before guys were hitting the lip and doing inverts and getting aerials. And when that happened, it was like, okay, here it's on. How fast are we going to go? How high are we going to go? And, through the 80s, it really exponentially, the curve, the learning curve and the amount of bodyboarders in the world, everything just went skyrocketed. So the Mach 7 was really the launching pad of the modern boogie board.
Stay tuned for part 2 of my interview with bodyboarding legend Pat Caldwell. Thanks for watching and listening to The Real Deal Show, and I'll see you in the surf.